And it is a very good morning, good afternoon from the Dubai section of Iwfm. This is our first webinar of the new year, so Happy New Year to all of you who are joining us today. We've got a fascinating first on behalf of Iwfm, which is a link up of 3 different regions from the UAE to Nigeria and to London. And the topic of today we're talking about is procurement. So we're also blessed with the presence of one of our procurement special interest group chairs, Anne Kinder. And in terms of the subjects for today, we're going to run through with a quick introduction with regards to Iwfm, and then I'll hand over to the moderator for today, who is Sarah Montaz. The individuals we have coming in from the respective regions, as I said, and there's Barry Clark, who's actually today sitting in Doha, which is where he's based, and then Wally Olafore, and then Steve McGregor from the London region, although he's not actually in London today, he is up in sunny Yorkshire. In terms of the sponsors which we have, only the UAE runs currently with event sponsors, which are Adib and BFM. Although this situation may well change in the year as it's going forward. So thanks to the sponsors for those particular events. And in terms of Iwfm itself, I just want to run through briefly in terms of our vision, and as the pioneering workplace and facilities management body, rebranded 2 years ago now. The aim is to become a trusted voice, but by empowering and enabling those working in this particular sector. That's the purpose of today, is to pass on experience and knowledge for those who are working at the very cutting edge of the industry, but also people who are specialists and study it from both academic and professional sources. So today, what we're looking at is some of the conditions that we've experienced over the last 12 months with an attempt to forecast for the month ahead. In terms of how this ties into the strategic aims for Iwfm, there are 4 overall. And the first is to become this recognised trust en route towards getting our chartered status as an institute. The second part is therefore to be a first choice destination. There are plenty of other organisations. We accept and acknowledge and respect those who overlap in terms of a Venn diagram with our aims. But fundamentally, what we're trying to do is to approach things in a slightly more light-hearted fireside chat, as it were. So the respective panelists you have today, there will be the opportunity to address them with questions, and we'll come to that just shortly as to how you can do it. Overall, it's to become the first choice development partner for individuals and organisations, and we'll cover off some of the links at the end of the presentation with how you can get advantage from Iwfm with regards academy, opportunities, training and development. So for today, procurement, the hot issues and supply chain management in 2021. For many people who are joining us today, there is some debate internally as to whether procurement has become the friend and benefit for the major corporations, and there's a lot of squeeze as risk is passed on and bought by SMEs. But fundamentally, there has to be, and has been in some organisations, some sectors, a fundamental change in the way that procurement is deployed in the last 12 months. And we've seen the uprise of online ordering, the Amazons of this world. And so these are some of the angles we're going to get to pursue during today's conversation. In terms of your moderator for today and the individuals who are there, first off will be, in terms of the agenda, the introductions to the presenters and the participants by Sarah. And then we'll move on through the special interest group presentation. That'll take about 8 to 10 minutes from Anne Kinder. Then we'll have 3 panelist questions which have been decided beforehand, which we'll throw to the respective panelists from the 3 regions. Each question has been provided by that region, and we'll rotate between the questioners. And then the open Q&A. And what I'd ask you to do is look at your own dashboard, and you'll see there's the opportunity there for questions. And now's the opportunity for this to be very much an interactive session. So by all means, please send your questions in as early as you wish for an individual panelist or for Sarah to allocate accordingly. Then we'll wrap it up after the Q&A, closing remarks in about 45, 50 minutes time, cover off some coming events, and then there is a little survey at the end which would ask you to feed back to us so we can do some metadata analysis. All the information you provide is confidential, and it helps us to improve the overall presentation. And in terms of your moderator for today, Sarah Montez, friend and colleague from the UAE region and a member of the Iwfm committee for this region. She's based in Abu Dhabi and has over 20 years of sector experience. Delighted and privileged to have worked with her over the whole of the last year developing this webinar series. And so over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, David. Assalamu alaikum, and a very good afternoon from Abu Dhabi, the capital of the UAE. As David mentioned, my name is Sarah Momtaz, and I'm delighted to welcome all of you to this very special edition of the Iwfm webinar series, where we're being joined by our Iwfm colleagues from Doha in Qatar, London in the UK, and Lagos in Nigeria. Today, we'll be tackling the importance of procurement and supply chain management in FM, of which we hope will create a platform for our experts to share their knowledge and for you, the audience, to present your questions or comments for us to talk about. So once again, a very warm welcome to all of our audience from across the world. Today's webinar, as mentioned by David, is titled Procurement, Hot Issues and Supply Chain Management in 2021, a very important topic and ultimately the core of our business. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined today by an expert team of international panelists who will be talking about their experiences from a strategic FM and also service provider perspective. We're going to be discussing and addressing how and if, within their respective organizations and personal experiences, the global pandemic and the economic situation has affected their supply chains and how we as an FM industry can move forward in the future. Now, before I introduce you to our panelists, let me just take this quick opportunity to introduce a very special guest, who is Anne Kinder. She is from the Iwfm Procurement Special Interest Group, and she'll be giving us a short presentation on the subject. A brief about Anne: she's a senior consultant with Nodis Solutions and provides client services in the UK and across Europe, and is also a certified Iwfm member with over 25 years experience in FM. She also chairs the Iwfm's Community Review Governance and Structure Working Group. And if that wasn't enough, she's also a lead judge for the Iwfm Awards. Now, in case you're wondering, the panelists and myself, we will be turning on our webcams once Anne has actually finished the presentation. We're just taking advantage of a few extra minutes in hair and makeup. So very warm welcome, Anne, and over to you.
Right, many thanks, Sarah, for your very kind introductions. It's very good, and good afternoon to everyone. I became chair of the Iwfm Special Interest Group only last month, actually, and within days, David was in touch with me about this opportunity to collaborate together on this webinar today. So many thanks to David and the team for that timely invitation. Prior to becoming chair, I was deputy chair of the Special Interest Group for 2 years. So it's great that this is my first event so early in the year. So the Procurement Special Interest Group, we've got a plan for 2021, which also involves collaboration with other Iwfm community groups. So we're working on an event with the People Management Special Interest Group on an event on social value in procurement. And then later in the year, we'll be working with the International Special Interest Group as well. Now, as well as webinars and events that we hold, the Procurement SIG, along with other community groups, we're looking at how we can best support Iwfm members by updating our current good practice guides and guidance notes, and also looking at producing new documents to share with members. We know from the recent Insights survey that members consider these documents very important indeed. And indeed, I know from my own work as a consultant that issues such as procurement and contract management are very, very important to colleagues across the globe. We need to be mindful, though, when we're developing our documentation, that it's relevant for all locations and not just for the UK. Sarah also mentioned that I'm chairing an Iwfm working group that I was asked to get involved with last year, which is a member-led review of our community's governance and structure. And what we're doing there is looking at a review of the community structure and looking at how we can best shape that going forward so that we can address that strategic aim of Iwfm that David mentioned regarding fostering vibrant, accessible and engaged communities. And I know that some of you will have engaged with our recent consultation exercise, so thank you so much for that. We'll be using that feedback together with the results of the Insight survey from last year to shape the future of our communities. So for today, I wanted to talk about two issues, one that's affecting us all, COVID-19. And many of you will have joined many of the excellent webinars that Iwfm have already hosted, and also the guidance that we can find on the website. There's a couple examples there of managing the impacts of COVID and the return to work guidance. And then the other issue I want to talk about was Brexit, which whilst you may think it's only directly relevant to the UK, it does actually have impacts across all of our trading partners too. But first of all, Brexit. We see there the UK flag, the Union Jack, being removed from the European Union Parliament building in Brussels in Belgium. And that was at the end of December 2020. But just a small bit of history, the UK voted to leave Brexit, to leave the European Union on the 23rd of June 2016, which does feel quite a long time ago. And the UK actually left the European Union almost a year ago on the 31st of January 2020. But during the last year, much has stayed the same. However, following the end of a transition period last year and the completion of a trade deal with the European Union, that was finally implemented at the start of this year. So a number of things changed straight away on the 1st of January for both UK and non-UK citizens. Regulations concerning trade, travel to and from the UK, and also immigration policies affecting those living and working in the UK. However, there's still many impacts that are going to affect many of our lives that are still to be worked through. And I just wanted to talk about one of those today that affects those of us working in procurement. Okay. So just on the next slide, we see the green paper. Well, it's actually white, but this is the start of a legislative process within the UK regarding transforming public procurement. This is relevant to all of those that are either buying or selling goods or services in the public sector. And this start of this journey continues the replacement of what was known as the Official Journal of the European Union, or OJEU. Now, OJEU was a publication where all tenders from the public sector valued over a certain limit were published across Europe, and companies from throughout Europe could bid for those tenders. In the UK, the value of public procurement is around £290 billion. It's a huge amount of money. And what the new legislation aims to do is to speed up and simplify the process of public procurement, to continue to ensure that we get public value when we're spending to ensure we're getting value for money when we're spending the public's money, and also to provide more opportunities for small businesses to bid for those tenders. Now, Iwfm have announced that they're going to be examining the impact and the implications of these proposals in the Green Paper, both for clients and for bidders. And then we'll be responding to this public consultation, which closes on the 10th of March this year. And the Procurement SIG will work with its members and support that response. Okay, so now on to our second issue, which impacts us all, and that's COVID. Now, what I wanted to do was focus on the impact that our colleagues in the workplace and facilities management sector have had in responding to the global pandemic, and the importance that's shown of clients and suppliers working together collaboratively during very difficult times. And where better to look than the 2020 Iwfm Awards, which included 4 special awards recognising the incredible response that our colleagues in workplace and facilities management achieved. So there were 69 entries for what were 4 awards last year, and 20 finalists were selected. A vote was held and 4 winners were presented with their awards in October 2020. The awards focused on those 4 areas that are shown on the slide there: keeping good work going, supporting the wider community, on the COVID frontline, and adapting to new realities. And I've included a link there to some more detail about the winners and the work they did. But I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes sharing the fantastic work that our colleagues carried out and continue to carry out as the UK is in lockdown. So the Keeping Good Work Going, that award was won by the Lloyds Banking Group and Mighty, their supply chain partner. This was a huge response to the COVID crisis and demonstrated a one team working. What they needed to do was ensure that all of their facilities were kept up and running so that both staff could keep working and customers could continue to carry out their personal and business banking. The scale of this was pretty immense. Lloyds have 1,600 banking branches across the UK, around about 100 offices, and then also data centres. And FM really came to the forefront of decision making within the business. And together with Mighty, the 2 organisations maintained productive, connected and safe working environments for employees, customers, and also their remote staff as well. Okay, the second award, supporting the wider community. Ashdown Phillips and Partners are a property management company, and they run the Edmonton Green Shopping Centre in North London. And when the COVID crisis hit, its impact was felt quite disproportionately in some very deprived areas, one of which was Edmonton. And the Ashdown Phillips and Partners team were actually down to 50% of their organisation due to people having to isolate or being impacted by COVID. And despite only having 50% of their team, they continued to keep the shopping centre running with 30 essential traders open. But what they also able to do was work with those retailers and provide donations to around 20 community groups, donating goods and services to help that really deprived community. When we look at the working on the COVID frontline, This award was won by the National Health Services Property Services team, their facilities management team. Now, the National Health Service has one of the largest property portfolios in the UK. So it's not just hospitals, but it's around 3,000 properties with 7,000 tenants across England. And when the pandemic hit, it really needed to repurpose space to provide urgent additional bed capacity, maintain clean and safe environments, and to implement new infection control standards. Now, this FM team comprises of around about 4,000 staff across England, including coordinators, team leaders, cleaners, porters, engineers and caterers. And what they achieved was tremendous. In 6 months, the first 6 months of the pandemic in 2020, the FM team conducted 2,585 deep cleans to help reduce the impact of the infection. They carried out 15,000 emergency or urgent jobs and 18,000 non-urgent jobs. They carried out 1,738 site risk assessments and facilitated the temporary closure of 98 buildings to help reduce the impact of infection. So huge effort there. And then finally, the Adapting to New Realities Award. This was won by a collaboration between the University of Greenwich in London, their partner Sodexo, and Gardner and Theobald. Now, the mobilisation of any contract, I think we'd all agree, can be very stressful. A new contract at the University of Greenwich was due to go live on the 18th of May. And that included mobilisation of around about 10 service lines, the transfer of 300 staff, all whilst maintaining essential services across 3 locations in London, without staff really having a lot of access to the site. So 5 weeks into the mobilisation, lockdown occurred. However, more than 100 staff worked collaboratively between the 3 partners, and they made the impossible possible. And as planned, the contract went live on the 18th of May. So tremendous effort by all 4 sets of Impact Award winners. And I just wanted to summarise with a quote from the chair of the judges, Julie Cortens. Julie said, "It has been an absolute privilege to be involved in the COVID Response Awards. It acts as a true reminder of how special workplace and facilities management really is, whether it's maintaining safe, productive and connected working environments, supporting the wider community, responding directly to the pandemic, or adapting to new realities. Every single one of you is a true FM hero." So the 2021 Impact Awards are going to be open on the 25th of January next week. And as a lead judge who's incredibly proud to work in our fantastic industry, I'd urge you all to consider how you might enter the awards and celebrate the impact that you make in our industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. That was very thought-provoking and insightful. We very much appreciate your time today. Right, so it's time for me to introduce our panelists. Firstly, we have Barry Clark, who is the COO at Musharraf Properties in Doha, Qatar. Barry has extensive international experience, particularly in the GCC, and was previously with SNC Lavalin, Mace Macro International, and the UK's NHS. He holds a PGMD from Lancaster University. Barry is a specialist in FM risk management, procurement, and consultancy services. Welcome, Barry. It's a pleasure to have you join us today from Doha.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here in this late afternoon here in Qatar.
Thanks, Barry. Our second panelist is Wally Olufori. He is the Managing Director of Iwfm based in Lagos, Nigeria. Wally holds an MBA from Southampton Solent University in the UK and has over 25 years experience in various industry sectors. In previous roles locally and internationally, he has specialized in contractual commercial performance and business development. Very warm welcome, Wally, and thank you for joining today's discussion from Lagos.
Sarah, it's good to be here.
Thanks, Wally. Final panelist today is Steve McGregor, who is the Group Managing Director of DMA in Rochester, the UK. His earlier roles were mainly in business development and sales with NG and the Compass Group. He has over 40 years of experience across the built environment, from DMB to TFM and outsourcing, leading teams to secure over £11 billion worth of international sales. Hello, Steve, welcome, and it's wonderful to have you join us from the UK this afternoon.
Thanks very much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great, thanks, Steve. Now, before I start, just a very quick reminder to the attendees that this is an interactive session, so please do get involved. We will be having the questions and answers session at the end. So if you do wish to present a question to the panelists, please feel free to do so, but put your name and where in the world you're tuning in from so we can actually give you a shout. We'll be standing by to receive your questions, and depending on how much time we have, we will answer as many as possible. And as David mentioned, after the discussion points, we'll also be airing a straw poll to which there'll be 3 answers for you to choose from. Just select the one that's best suited to you. Just to reiterate, it's a completely anonymous poll and your details are not captured. So please feel free to answer as honestly as you can. We urge you to make your voice heard, and as always, these webinar sessions are designed for you, the audience, so your input is very, very much valued. Now, before we start, just a very quick reminder that this session is being recorded and the recording will be released on the Iwfm website in due course. Right, so all the formalities are out the way. I think it's now time for me to turn on my camera and say good afternoon to everyone. Hello. So we can get straight into the discussion point. And apologies if I have, apparently I'm experiencing some mild technical issues. I think I'm cutting out, or there's something wrong with my sound. So apologies for that if that does come across. Let's start with the first discussion point. Now, just to let the audience know, as this is a collaborative webinar, we've actually had the discussion points or the talking points sent in from each of our colleagues from each of the regions, and we're going to be starting those alphabetically. So as I'm in Abu Dhabi, Barry's in Doha, we get to go first, and this is our question. So I'd like to ask you first, Barry, considering the major logistical challenges brought on by the pandemic, what significant problems did you face as a result of delays, or if you have experienced any delays?
I mean, I think we did, and I think a lot of the factors, a lot of the challenges are common across the world. When you're dealing with what I call the M&Ms of procurement, you know, materials, money, movement, and man. And I don't mean that in a gender typical format. I mean men as people.
That's all right. There's man in women as well. That's okay. The word's there. That's okay.
So you know, when you're dealing with those 4 issues against the pandemic, it leads to quite an interesting dynamic and movement. And let's talk about movement as the first one. And I mean, I think that's one of the first restrictions I think we came across, and not only cross-border restrictions, but as we know in the Middle East, there was regional restrictions, and even in the one country of the United Arab Emirates, you know, you had Abu Dhabi and Dubai adopting different different strategies, and moving materials even within the country was difficult. And then you've obviously got the local issues and even within a city like Doha, you know, when we had outbreaks of COVID, we had to close labour camps, and that meant even movement within the city was exceptionally difficult. So, you know, that was our one of our biggest issues. We were probably a little bit better placed than most regions in the world, because obviously 2 years previously we'd gone through the embargo, and obviously that had already stimulated a complete review of our procurement strategies, because we weren't able to bring goods in or indeed services from the countries that had embargoed us. So, you know, the procurement strategies had already and very recently been reviewed and refocused to deal with those issues. And I think one of the things that we learned from that exercise was, you know, the tendency to go for globalization was not necessarily the best thing to do. And in fact, when it came to materials and manufacturing and movement, actually local production was something that came to us, hit us in the head, if you like, and so we started seeing a growth of our manufacturing capability within Qatar. That you know, we were using our local labour and resources to manufacture the goods, as well as obviously bring them in from wider afield. So we'd already widened our procurement search and sourcing, if you like. Obviously, one of the biggest problems was the Middle East generally, I think, immediately restricted the movement of labour. So when it came to our service contracts, they became quite difficult to manage and grow, because, you know, we couldn't get new recruits. We weren't allowed to bring them in because, again, as most people will know, we're very reliant on an immigrant workforce in the Middle East.
Yeah,
and obviously immigration was very, very strictly controlled. And that not only was bringing people in, but it was actually also getting people back out. So the workers that were stuck and stranded here were also suffering, because they were concerned about their families in the places where they lived. So that again had an impact on the motivation factor of not only service delivery but manufacturing. And so, as a management team at a strategic and tactical level, you really did have to start thinking about, you know, things that you took for granted in the early days. I think one of the other things that really came home was, you know, we buy widgets, but we don't know where those widgets come from. You know, we don't know where the parts for those widgets come from. And so we're buying, and, you know, do we know where our supplier's supply chain is? So that was also quite an interesting risk management analysis when it came to buying goods in particular. You know, and again, we'd experienced that a little bit in our manufacturing cycle when we came to local manufacturing. Obviously, yeah. I think everybody suffers the money issue, cash flow, the cost of materials, the cost of goods, the escalation. But I think one of the biggest things I found was that, you know, because of the shortage of some of the materials, consumables, tissues, cleaning materials, those sorts of things, I was probably buying more than I did normally. We were used to a just-in-time, lean inventory type approach, and now, you know, when I could get hold of tissues and toilet paper, I was buying as much as I could, sort of thing, to make sure that my city didn't suffer as a result.
Yeah, great.
So
that's very interesting.
That had a double impact, not only insofar as that I've given over all of my storage areas and just keep a just-in-time storage capability within the city, and I now needed warehouses to store some of these consumables and goods. So that was an interesting reverse dynamic from previously.
Great. Thanks for that, Barry. It's also interesting that you mentioned the fact that you were able to kind of, capitalize on the potential within the country. I think that's something that all of us have also experienced at some point. Thank you very much for that. Can I go over to Wally and bring him into the discussion, please?
Okay, yeah, but basically, I think I agree with Barry. The pandemic has forced us to begin to look at other alternative ways of doing the traditional things we are used to doing. We talk about a flexible workforce, where you have to upskill and reskill so that they can meet the demands of the times. Because right now in Africa, because that's where we operate presently, there's a lot of things that we do manually. Now, because of the pandemic, we have been forced to leverage technology and inform all our vendors in our supply chain pool to upskill so that we are able to deal with them, make less contact, and then business is going on willy-nilly. For us, as service providers to multinationals, we have been able to do this seamlessly. Yeah, our standards remains the same, just like the multinationals from America and Europe that we work with locally. But during the pandemic, we had been forced to just say, look, guys, that's to our own subcontractors, you need to upskill, you need to alter your workforce so that you can meet the demands of the time. So for us, it's about tagging along, flexibility, enables us to adapt to the sign of the times. And if you are too rigid, then you will not be a part of the players in the business world. So simply speaking, the pandemic, as much as it is challenging, it has created opportunities for a lot of improvement in several areas of our business.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. There's always opportunities in a crisis situation. Thank you very much, Wally. Steve, let's get your insights on this, please.
Thanks very much. Maybe just to contextualize initially, I have the pleasure of leading a 217-year-old family business that's based in Kent and serves the south of England and London predominantly. We have a factory that produces specialist bespoke joinery. We design and deliver projects in buildings, and we also have mobile and resident maintenance teams that serve our customers' properties as well. So turning specifically now to COVID, certainly in the UK, the impact was both swift and severe. On the 23rd of March, we went into national lockdown, and Anne has already mentioned the added complexity of Brexit. So we don't do things by halves in the UK. So for us as a business, basically it put pay to any long-term strategic focus. This was all about the tactic of the here and now. So we set ourselves 3 clear objectives as a business during this initial challenge of, and now we're in the 3rd lockdown in the UK as well. One was to survive, to make sure that we protected the legacy of our 217-year-old business. So all the decisions around how we got ourselves into the best shape, and we're pleased that we got through 2020. Secondly, to protect the jobs and the welfare and safety of 120 colleagues that work within our business. And thirdly, but no less importantly, to protect our customers 200 customers in over 2,500 buildings. So, it was very much about the here and now. We focused on, the real necessity of what needed to be done rather than the nice to haves, and that obviously helped. The construction sector and the building industry within the UK continued and remained open. There were some early challenges in terms of supply chain, but we all experienced some delays. We all experienced and expected those delays as well. Some of them were predictable. You know, our own subcontractors were very much in the same boat as ourselves. And there was much publicised in the UK about PPE and some of the obvious materials that we needed to conduct our service. But we just recognised we had to get on with it. You know, we focused on the things that we could influence and the things that we could do to protect our customers, our people, and our business. And you know, that really was the focus. The problems were many and varied, and I think in hindsight, you know, kind of UK PLC and the businesses within it have done pretty well, but it hasn't been easy.
Great. Exciting stuff. There's a lot going on. Thank you very much for that, Steve. Let's go over to the straw poll question. Let's get our audience involved. They've been waiting patiently. I know this is their favorite part of the webinar. So fingers at the ready, guys. There's quite a few people online, so I'm quite happy to say we're almost at around 200 attendees. So I'm going to give you a little bit longer this time to answer. So give you around about 45 seconds to a minute. You've got 3 possible options to choose from, and the question is, if COVID continues to impact global supply chains through 2021, what safety measures should FM companies introduce? So option A, dedicated cash reserves to purchase emergency supplies. Option B, increased portfolio of vendors to ensure availability of items. I believe that's supposed to be, there's a M and S missing off of that. And option C is purchasing in bulk to increase replenished stock reserves. So please go ahead, choose A, B or C. And while we're giving the guys a few seconds to answer, I'm not sure what the panelists think. Do you have any indication on which one is going to be coming up trumps, guys? No? Nobody wants to call it. Okay. Okay.
It'd be interesting
All right.
to see.
Oh, well, I mean, it's almost, I mean, 2 of them are kind of split down the line. But option B, increased portfolio of vendors to ensure availability of items, which makes sense. Thank you very much to everyone who participated in that. Right, let's go on to our second question, which has come in from our colleagues in Lagos. So because of that, Wally, I'd like to start with you. So Wally, how were procurement standards in your region impacted during the pandemic, and what strategies did you find necessary to adopt?
Okay, again, you know, like I said earlier, you know, standards are the standards. You know, that's what we live by as an ISO certified company in, you know, strategic and organizational management. You see, what has happened locally in Nigeria and the rest of Africa where we operate is that we have been maintaining pretty much standards that aligns with business continuity. So we had invested in the technology to support everything that we do across board. So when the pandemic happened, we were able to respond to all our clients. Now, what have we done when we begin to see, you know, that some of our vendors are unable to, you know, keep up with the pace of work, especially with the restrictions, you know, was to help these guys to retool and reskill them in the way to be able to respond to us. Now, because we didn't have the issue, we didn't have the storage problems, because normally in our day-to-day activity, we always plan for when there is a public holiday, bank holiday, and then business goes on, because we are in the business of FM 24/7/365. So, but our vendors, what we have done to them is to, you know, form an alliance, you know, in a situation where we identify those who have capacity and who are able to help us to respond to the needs of the time. Now, we had to change some of the routine contracts to strategic long-term contracts and renegotiated some of them to reduce the cost profile. Now, some of the savings there we were able to, you know, spend on storage, because warehousing, you would agree, it costs money as well. So in a nutshell, we have been able to balance the business in such a way that the long-term financial value creation to the client is sustained, regardless of what the pandemic says. the restrictions has enabled us to go back into the drawing board to say, okay, what can we do differently? We have to now be flexible. You know, some staff will come in today, some will come in tomorrow, and then, but it does not stop the service at the end of the day. So we were able to, you know, kind of improve the standards, the procurement standards of vendors who supply into us, and enables us to continue to provide service to the to our clients. Now, there's one of the things that we have to do is to make sure that we integrate that resiliency in our supply chain. Now, the resiliency comes from the ability of the vendor to go digital, you know, so that there is less interaction because we need to comply with the protocols of COVID. There is opportunity to strategically align with some supply chain vendors who have capacity to deliver what we need for 6 months at a go. And at the end of the day, we are able to convince some of our clients to even pay more money, because in these times, the focus of procurement that is very strategic is not necessarily to save costs, but to enhance service delivery to the end user of the service. So we have been able to do this effortlessly since the pandemic happened, and we are continuing to even, you know, increase our investment in innovations and new ways of doing things. Talk about Internet of Things, the AI of this world. We are already doing that because it's the way to go to add value to our multinational clients, and we believe we are able to, you know, replicate this across the continent of Africa, everywhere that we operate. So this the pandemic again, you know, as you know, transform the demand and supply side of things. You know, most businesses in our sphere now, if they are not forcing us to do things, we are forcing them to align with what works, especially when we say we are a company that complies with global best practice. One of the easiest ways we have done that is to ensure that technology plays a major role in our B2B, and how we have transformed the various channels where we do procurement to enhance and facilitate continuous business to ours and service delivery to our clients.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Wally. Barry, can I bring you into the conversation and get your thoughts on this, please?
Okay, I mean, I think on this one, again, most of the points have been touched on, but I think what we found in particular that we needed to be a lot more agile and flexible than our governance and due diligence systems and processes allowed us to be. So we had to park those at the back of the burner, if you like, but not lose sight of the fact that we did need to maintain a level of governance and a level of due diligence in the whole of the process. But you know, when you can buy 500 boxes of tissues, you've got to be fairly agile and get them on board, or 10,000 litres of cleaning fluid or whatever, or oil for maintenance, or whatever. You've got to have that flexibility and agility to be able to respond to that, which sometimes doesn't give us the standards that we aspire to. And obviously, I think Steve referred to it earlier on, the debacle of buying the PPE masks that the British government went through in the early days is testament to that. I also think there were times when I found it difficult to maintain our sustainability agenda in terms of the quality of materials, the materials with minimized packaging, all of those sorts of things that make us a sustainable city. It was sometimes quite hard in the circumstances, the market that had been created to reach those standards. Fortunately, we didn't compromise, or didn't have to compromise, but I suspect if the same conditions continue, we will find it difficult to maintain those sustainability procurement standards. And then
Yeah.
I think the last thing that I'd say on this particular subject is that we like to build up relationships. We like to have alliances, collaboration. We like to have partnerships, supply chain partners that we can do the majority of our business with. I'm afraid in the circumstances we found ourselves, some of those relationships became strained for a number of reasons, not least of all because, normally I would buy my products through a supply chain partner, but if all of a sudden those products became available elsewhere on the market, I would go and buy them elsewhere on the market, which, strained sometimes the relationships, the collaborative approach that I want to achieve with our supply chain. So I think they're the main areas in terms of standards that I would.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you very much for sharing that, Barry. And you and Wally make very good points regarding the sort of agility that FMs need to have, which is absolutely key, particularly in that now. Steve, can I get your thoughts on this, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. It's good to know there's a lot of overlap between the regions here in terms of some of the more obvious approaches to this. But I think if we're honest, we all knew this was coming. The press coverage was high during the latter part of 2019 going into 2020. So whilst the timing was short notice, we knew this was coming. So as a business ourselves, we acted early where we could. Because a lot of what we did was planned and pre-planned. We could predict what materials and resources we need. So there was the more simplistic approach of looking how we could aggregate stuff and get hold of it earlier. I mentioned that we focused on necessity. So most of that was keeping our customers compliant, because many of them had to leave their buildings at very short notice as well. So, just making sure we had that good governance and stewardship over their property. We stockpiled where we could, but everyone was doing the same thing. So we all had to accept that, again, we were all in the same boat. So, setting your expectations that, getting hold of the PPE, but, it was a challenge on occasion, but we all got what we needed and made our way through. My career spanned working for global organizations, and I'm very much with a regional one now. And what I've witnessed is firsthand is the agility and the flexibility that small businesses have for swift decision making, and certainly our customers have benefited from that.
Yeah.
But to pick up a point that Wale mentioned earlier, for us, technology was the enabler and the critical factor, the critical success factor. Communications, being able to communicate internally with our suppliers and with our customers regularly, being able to track and digitalize our processes so that we reduce the human interaction, but also the ordering and payment, being able to pay our supply chain swiftly as well, because cash and cash management is really important in a crisis. So, the FM industry, whilst we're still in the midst of it, should both look forward and backwards with pride. Because we've definitely made a difference, and I think all of us should be very proud of the contributions that we make.
Absolutely, that's a great point. Thank you very much, Steve. Let's go on to our second straw poll. We'll bring the audience back in. Right, guys, so you've got, again, 3 options to choose from. I'll read it quickly because we are running a little bit behind time. So during the pandemic, how important is effective supply chain management for multinational FM customers? Option A, not important. The focus is on business survival, not excellence. Option B, semi-important, indifferent on supply chain impact on FM. And the last option, very important, clients see SCM as key to quality FMS. So, sorry, not going to give you a minute on this one, probably around about 20 to 30 seconds. We've had such an interesting conversation that we're running a little bit behind time. Any of the gents want to call this one? Throwing it out there to the floor.
Semi-important.
Yeah, I was going to say middle for dinner sounds good, doesn't it?
Ah, there you go. There you go. It is, of course. See, it's very important. So it's actually, I'm happy to see that, because obviously people that have responded to this are getting those responses from the customers that they're serving, so they know the importance of quality in the supply chain. Great, thank you very much, audience. Third and final question, which is coming to us from the London region, and therefore I'll start with Steve on this one, please. What will sustainable procurement solutions look like in the future? Does sustainability come with a cost? And if so, how do we balance the two? Controversial question.
Indeed. Thanks very much for saving that one, Sarah. So I think on reflection, and there'll probably be a lot of reflection over the coming months and years on this, looking on a more positive context here, despite the challenges that we've all faced and are facing, COVID has changed some things for the better and some things permanently as well. I mentioned technology just now, so I think the adoption of technology is going to make a very big difference, and I think the pace of that adoption will be marked after and during this process. Flexible working, we've seen as businesses have adapted and adopted very quickly flexible working. The environmental focus that's been a byproduct of this as well. So people working in London particularly aren't spending up to 2.5 hours of their time potentially each way, traveling, and all of the environmental impact that has. And the wellness focus as well. So, on the one hand, people are able to work from home and maintain, supply and business. But there's a wellness focus for this in terms of mental health and still being able to create community and the feel of community, similar to opportunities like this, Sarah, really.
Yeah.
So I think probably, and it'd be interesting to see how the viewers, as it were, consider this, but I think most of us probably expect that there is a cost associated to sustainability. And how do we balance those increased costs? And I think firstly, for me, there's 7 key points. I won't go through all of them in detail, but the first one for me is more about the circular economy. So we're focusing less dependence on those dwindling resources and more about renewables, recycling and reuse. So we're looking to, extract waste from our procurement as well. Resilience. I think you mentioned resilience yourself, Barry, as well. So I think past efficiency drives and that relentless pursuit of efficiency, whether it be globally or by a building, has effectively ironed out a lot of the resilience that we would have liked to have had within our delivery models. So I think there'll be some decoupling of that going forward as customers recognises and business recognise that we need to have more flexibility within that global, national, local dimension. So for me, I believe that, the cost could be reduced significantly by innovation, particularly in a saturated marketplace. And we all operate in a saturated market, whether we like it or not. So, how we can leverage innovation. Visibility of our supply chains is key as well. So having worked in larger organizations myself, we've always got very clear visibility of tier 1 suppliers, but tier 2 and beyond is, from my experience, where the risk as well as the opportunity lies as well. I think we need to recognize and maximize what we already do well. The agility, I won't spend too much time on that, but I think that big isn't always better. And I think that decoupling will mean that we'll have much more granularity about where we better buy services. And I'll end again on technology, because I think that digitalization, the automation of back of house and business process will make a big difference. Being able to use that to get hold of real-time data that can inform our decision making and be more accurate in demand management, but also helping us to reconcile some of the dilemmas that will obviously emerge as a consequence of us wrestling with the future.
Wonderful. That's very interesting. Thank you so much for that, Steve. Let's bring Wally back in to get his thoughts on this one, please.
Okay. Again, with the pandemic, the workspace is becoming more fluid, and we are in the age of this generational convergence that informs most corporates to, invest in technology and innovative ideas that cuts across the generation X and Y and Z that are in the workspace today. The end game of every business is business productivity and profits. And to a large extent, when you invest time and money in technology, when your character is that of bit agile, and responsive to the demands of the time, obviously it comes back. The end game is good service, business productivity, and then profit. Now, the balance is the money you are investing, so long as the end justifies the means in terms of profitability, that cost becomes a normal run in day-to-day business. And then the effect for me, for the way I look at it, is it balances out, because once you have made upfront investment and you're getting the response, the kind of productivity you need in the business, there's profit to be made. So it becomes a balanced equation, and the business becomes sustainable once you are able to marry the younger generations, who want to work fluidly and flexibly. Once you're able to marry that with, the standards you have set up, I think you are going to achieve what you call sustainable procurement or sustainable business. And when a business is sustainable, there's no point trying to look at the cost again, because the end already justifies the means. Once you are there, you are there. The plan is you invest, and then you expect there's certain result that you expect to get in return. And once you are seeing those results, it's not going to be short term anyway, it's going to be long term. Once you are seeing those results, it balances out, and there's sustainability. Whether we like it or not, the pandemic has come to stay with us. We have to now be flexible enough to adapt to what it takes to work safely and live safely, amongst ourselves, and still be able to take some good profit home. That's the way I look at this issue of sustainability. Yeah.
It's a great point, Wally. It's here to stay. I like that. And we just have to learn to live with it. Absolutely. Now, just before I go over to get Barry's thoughts, just to let everyone know, we are running a little bit behind schedule. It's around about 5 o'clock now. So we should need another 10 or so minutes to wrap up, and then obviously allow time for the questions and answers. So please stay with us, whoever's watching. Apologies for the slight delay in getting things done, but it's such an interesting conversation. I'm sure you're enjoying it as much as I am. And Barry is about to enlighten us with his thoughts.
I think very, very quickly, Sarah, I'd say my answer's in 3 bubbles. The first is, what do we mean by sustainable going forward? It doesn't have the same definition as it did before the pandemic. Will we be changing our understanding of sustainable? So that's the first bubble. And obviously, if we change our definition of sustainable, then obviously the term sustainable procurement changes as well with that. So I think that's going to be an important thing. Whatever happens, however we define it, wherever we move to, I see increased bureaucracy. I see increased counting, checking, auditing. I see more certificates, more, and you're suffering from that in the UK at the minute with Brexit and cross-border controls. I think that's been compounded by COVID, and it's the same across the world. We have to have import certificates, all these sorts of things. We're going to need more bureaucracy, and therefore we need more technology and data management systems to handle that. So that's another bubble that I think will change and cost us more money. I think the other thing is that we over the last 20, 30 years of my life have moved towards a globalization type manufacturing and getting goods around the world and all that sort of thing. I can see that changing, and we may not lose globalization as a thinking and a innovation and a design capability. But I think what the industries will do is try and look more closely at localized manufacturing. So they're my three bubbles about the way forward. And obviously all of those have an initial higher cost, but actually might have a better value.
Great. What wonderful points. Thank you very much for that, Barry. Much appreciated. Let's do our last straw poll. Last opportunity for the audience to get involved in these questions. As we're running a bit short on time, I'll just go straight ahead and read them out. So final question is, how important is it to foster existing relationships with good suppliers, and how can these best be retained and developed? So option 1, they're not important. Prompt payments are more crucial. Option B, semi-important. A balanced approach gives best results. Or option C, very important. Good relationships equal extended courtesies. So 20 seconds, guys, to answer that. I'm going to call option C. I don't know what the gents think.
Absolutely.
I hope I'm right.
I'm going up to B again.
We're going for C. Oh, look at that. 88%. Superb. And 1% have actually said that the prompt payments are more critical. That's very interesting. Thank you very much, panelists. Right, quick questions and answers, guys. As we are a little bit short on time, I will just like you to please summarize, if you can, the responses in about 30 seconds. We've got a question that's coming for Steve from Andy in the UK. His question reads, what are the views of global procurement single provider strategy versus global procurement strategy utilizing the regional market, especially following Brexit?
Well, sorry,
you know, you had to have a Brexit question in.
Absolutely.
It was inevitable. It was going to happen.
I spent very nearly 12 years selling global deals whilst I was with Compass Group. And, you know, if I was being really honest, and I must share with you my personal opinion, this doesn't necessarily reflect the opinion of the industry, but quite often in these very large global single provider deals, you know, the suppliers often overstated their local presence and capability. So there was either a visible dependence conveyed on the local supply chain, or it was concealed and was badged up as being the single provider. I think where single providers has worked well from my experience has been with the key single service provision, so catering, for example, and hospitality, maybe security, so that you're looking at very bespoke areas of single service provision. But even then, none of the providers that exist globally at the moment have all of the geographies covered around the world. So I think without doubt, and you know, I think it will be necessity. I mentioned resilience earlier, that I see that local market provision will become an increasing and expected part of these larger international solutions, which, I mean, customers have driven this in the past by looking to aggregate scale and basically slice cost out of the delivery model. So, you know, they can't have their cake and eat it. If you want a resilient supply chain and you want, you know, courteous relationships with your key suppliers, you know, then there needs to be some give and take in this, and it's not going to be a big is beautiful. So I think it will increasingly start to look at decoupling the supply chain. But where the large single providers have got to spend time is in, and I think it's probably technology and digitalization of how they manage, interface, communicate, and commercially engage with their supply chain.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Steve. I'll go straight over to a question for you, Wally. And if you can just please keep your response brief. Apologies for this, it's just for the time. The question is, how do we build in sustainability and diversity in the procurement process, or is value for money always the best option? And unfortunately, I don't know who that's from. It's an anonymous question.
Okay, yeah, okay. Well, value for money has always been something that is critical, and between the client and the vendor, value for money is what you're paying for. You know, the service you're getting. You know, you want to be sure that that is exactly what you are paying for. But contractual terms and conditions differ, and this may not help us to focus on value for money when the client is all about savings, savings, savings. But like I said, because of the need to tweak a whole lot of things following the pandemic, there's a lot of re-evaluation of risk and investments and opportunities that is ongoing in organizational cycles that is dovetailing into, you know, sustainable procurement, and you cannot shy away from, you know, integrating value for money into that space. So basically, I mean, where we operate, value for money is very key, you know, but service excellence is always the name of the game. So for us, our procurement standards remains unchanged. The pandemic has only come to enhance it, and within a framework, especially in Africa, we are a learning organization. We are catching up with those in Europe and America, and we are doing exactly what is obtainable out there, right here in the continent of Africa. So value for money is key, and it's the result that you get. But then your contract, your terms and conditions is what will enable you to really focus on value for money and be sure that you are achieving just that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Wally. Barry, we've got a question for you from Yusuf, and he wants to know, do you think that the pandemic has affected tendering or may have influence of tenders in current years, meaning this year, 2021, and would be a driver to cost cutting, which may lead to re-tendering FM projects?
I think without doubt, the answer's got to be yes. I mean, I've got a board of directors here that think the pandemic has brought about a, you know, should have brought about a cheaper cost base. So they're chasing me all the time to mature the savings from COVID. Well, you know, I think us professionals understand that. There's probably little, if no, savings, and in fact, there's probably been a premium, particularly when you've increased the standards of, you know, hygiene, cleaning, and all of those sorts of things. So I think it will bring about, as Stephen said, a complete relook at the way we deliver contracts. And I know in the Middle East and at multinational level, we've gone to sort of international, I hate the word TFM, I prefer Iwfm contracts. And so I do think it will change the whole dynamic of the industry going forward. I'm not sure immediately, I'm not sure in the next 6 months, I'm not sure, you know, in the next year, but I do think we will be looking at contracts and utilisation, optimisation, driving value. And just to very quickly cover one point in Wally's answer, I do hope that we start taking social responsibility as an agenda item or a component of value. Yeah, you know, it's not just about cost, it's not just about quality, it is about social responsibility as well. And I think that, more than anything, is what comes out of to me, the pandemic experience.
Absolutely, and it's actually a very good note to end on. Thank you very much, Barry. Unfortunately, we've actually come to the end. As you know, we're slightly over in terms of time, but it's been an absolute pleasure as always hosting these webinar sessions. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Please be sure to tune in to the next webinar in the IWFM UAE series, which will be happening in February. David's going to just quickly be coming back just to give you some upcoming dates and events for your diaries. But just before he does, I'd like to sincerely thank you all the attendees and the participants for tuning in today and taking part in the straw poll questions, and also sending through your questions to our panelists. Of course, a huge thank you to our brilliant panelists. We've got Barry, Wally and Steve. Thanks for sharing your experience and knowledge on such a significant and challenging subject. Big thank you to our sponsors and also our support team in the UK and here in the UAE. Without them, you know, these webinars would not be possible. So thanks to Iwfm and BFM on behalf of IWFM. And I think it's now time for me to hand over to David. So thank you, gents, and goodbye from us, and over to David.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for being our moderator today. I will repeat the thanks to Barry, Steve and Wally. It's a first for IWFM having a link up between 3 regions. Thanks also to Anne coming in as the head of a procurement chair. And what I'd like to be able to do now is just to let people know about what's coming up in the near future. After today, we're still running a series of webinars. The plan is throughout 2021. Our next plan will be in a month's time on the 16th of February. Coming up later in the year, on the 5th and 6th of May, there's a look at ISO 41012, and we're getting really into the nitty-gritty, but it's a 2-day virtual training course by IWFM experts. There's a whole list of academy courses that can be delivered either in company or for your own team, so please have a look at those links. You don't have to do a screen capture now, but the whole of this recording will be published via YouTube within a day or so. Also, you'll see that on the IWFM website, there's community events and our own LinkedIn, very successful UAE group, which is now expanded to almost 1,200 members for further details. We're also listed as IWFM UAE group for the social dimensions, which we hope in due course, as the vaccination achieves its success, we'll be able to go back to some face-to-face contact, and also contacts via Twitter. In terms of other schedules, if you want to take your further professional development in Academy, please do look at the IWFM website and at the Academy calendar, because there is probably a topic for everything that you individually need or your organizations. And what I would encourage you to do is, by looking at these, contact the individuals who are there on the websites to see how you can progress and achieve in 2021 personal progress, whereas otherwise perhaps last year many things were tight. At the end of this session, you'll be offered the opportunity to provide your feedback. Everything you have, positive and negative, is important, but we would appreciate you passing that back to us so we can ourselves improve. Thank you again. I do apologize for those that were hoping we'd finish within the 1 hour. Unfortunately, would it have so many different targets to try to achieve, we've gone over by about 17 minutes. But I hope it was worthwhile. Hope you enjoyed it. That's it from me in Dubai, and I look forward to speaking to you again in a month's time with our number 2 of 2021. Until then, stay safe, stay sane, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Cheers, David.
Cheers. Bye.